Hello, this is Mahmoud Elmasry. I'm a program coordinator in the MENA program at Witness, and I'm today speaking with two of my amazing colleagues. I'm speaking with Yvonne Ng. Yvonne is the senior program manager of the archives program at Witness. Yvonne has great experience when it comes to archiving. She is audiovisual archive expert, and she has more than 15 years of experience. You will be able to know about Yvonne more in the links underneath this video. I'm also with Ines Aisengart. Ines is the program coordinator in archiving as well at Witness. Ines is from Brazil, and she has more than 20 years of experience when it comes to audiovisual archives as well. I'm very happy that I'm with these two amazing colleagues. That I'm very privileged to know them, and I'm very privileged to know their work like closely. As you know, in Witness nowadays or in this time, we do have a campaign about archiving. We do believe as a human rights organization that archiving is a very important element when it comes to human rights advocacy, when it comes to documentation for human rights advocacy. And we do also understand that this is an area that might really be helpful for human rights defenders to be empowered and to be supported in this area. So in this video, we're gonna chat a little bit about one element of archiving. And this element of archiving is the database, and how the database, for anyone who cares about the material or the media resources that they have, either it is video or otherwise, and how it is very important to make sure that you have database in place that can help you to save this material and also to make it accessible whenever it is needed. More about the campaign that Witness is undergoing now, you can find out again in the links underneath this video. And just I will start right away. Again, this is a conversation and this is a chat about archiving and about database for archiving and about a very important element in the archiving aspect. So I will ask Ines a very basic question, and I think like many activists is what that will be asking the same question, which is, what database tool should I use to manage my videos?
Hey, Mahmoud, thank you for this great conversation. So this question doesn't have one answer. There is no single correct answer. It really depends in several factors. So the reply to your question is depends.
I mean, really, it is the first question in the video is that, okay, what is the database should I use? And very like, straightforwardly, we don't have a correct answer. And I think we're setting the expectations from the beginning that we don't have a correct answers. We will present the facts, and the user, they will be able to choose and make the informed decision. And I think our role is only just presenting the facts. Okay, so if there is factors that will help me to choose the correct database for archiving or cataloging, what are those factors?
So I would start with the cost, and the cost should be evaluated in the cost of implementation, but in the cost in the long run. And then there is the technical requirements for that specific collection and the specific, the possibility of your technical setting. And also about how you're going to build this database, if it's going to be a joint effort with a big team or a smaller team, you're going to have community engagement or the collaboration with other people. These are some of the factors.
Yvonne, want to add more on that?
Yeah, I think there's like a few other factors that I can add to that list. I think, depending on who you are, who the team that's going to be using the database is, you really have to think about like usability and accessibility of the tool. So it depends on like what the skill level is within the team. You would also want to look out for like what support or training is required to use the tool and what support the tool developer might provide for that. You might also want to be thinking about scalability and sustainability. So like, will you be able to sustain usage of this tool? You don't want to build something that you can't maintain over time, or that you can't grow over time if your collection is growing. And then finally, because we are talking about human rights information, human rights data, another really important factor is the security and privacy needs that you have for your collection, and whether that tool can support your security and privacy needs.
Yeah, okay, that's now okay, making the image a little bit clearer. So in the beginning, we said like, okay, there's no single correct answer to tell you like, okay, what should you use? But there are now factors, and we're talking about like, I think you both mentioned like important factors that we should take into account whenever we are trying, or any human rights defender is trying to choose like a cataloging or database tool to help them in their archiving efforts. You mentioned cost, you mentioned technical requirements, you mentioned the collaboration involved in this archiving, usability and accessibility, support and training, scalability and sustainability, and security and privacy, because we are aware that we're talking about archiving, and we're talking about archiving in the sphere of human rights work, in the sphere of human rights documentation. So definitely privacy also and security is always priority when it comes to that. So and I will stick with you more, Yvonne, because I want to ask you one more question about the importance of having a strong and underlying data model. Would you tell us more about this?
Yeah, I think this is an important point to emphasize, because I think, Ines and I get asked a lot about like, what tool should I use? Like the people always sort of start first by thinking about the tool. But in fact, like, no matter what tool you use, you need to have strong underlying data model, meaning like the structure of your catalog or your database needs to be, well thought out. So it doesn't matter what tool you're using. With any tool, you need to have a well-designed data structure.
And I would add, not only, and this what Yvonne just shared, this is for very simple, but also to very complex. The data model is is the key factor to the success of your database in terms of creating, updating, and retrieving information out of it. But I would add that we also need a data dictionary, a controlled list of terms where people can understand how they should insert the information. And this is crucial to avoid naming the same thing with two synonyms, or naming one person or institution in different ways. And it's gonna provide the cohesion for your database.
Yeah, and on that I would just remember like a problem that came with naming, that some group of people, like one team member was naming the files dated, but one of them was using American style dates and the other was using European style dates, which is like, it's just a swap of the day and the month. But how big influence this has on the data, because any organization of the data, it would just mess up everything. So I would really echo the idea of agreeing on the terms that used, agreeing on the way that everything is named, etc. And I will go back to Yvonne, because I think there is another point on that.
Yeah. So, in addition to having good structure, good rules, and have that all documented in a data dictionary, I think another important thing to think about is that you incorporate this process of entering data into your database or cataloging into your workflow. So you know who on your team is responsible for doing it, when it happens, so that it's really built into the way that you work, so that it actually happens. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think. I think when we talk about this model, we'll talk about that. First of all, we start with the structure, how we really like the structure of the model, whatever it is very important. And then we talk about the terminology and the diction that used in this naming. And the third item is also like how we can use this and incorporate it in the workflow, and how this can be also important in our data base model, whatever it is. Again, we're setting the expectations clear for anyone who's watching the video, and we agreed that we're not gonna say like, a specific answer for any like what is the best database that you should use, etc. We're just giving people the factors that they should choose based on, and we're very confident that this will be helpful to people wherever they are to be able to choose like a cataloging model or database model for the archiving. But yet, I think just to continue that, I think it will be also helpful to maybe consult and mention some examples that was used by people or groups or activists who are trying to archive and use a database model for archiving. I'm sure. Can I start with Yvonne and just like ask her like if you have on the top of your mind an example that can be helpful for people to learn from?
Yeah, we have a few examples that Ines and I can share based on our experience working with partners at Witness. And if you don't mind, I'm going to look a little bit at some notes that I have. We actually have written a blog post on this topic where we kind of go into a lot of detail about some of these tools. So I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out when I talk about them. So the first tool I want to mention is one that's called Uwazi. It's an open source database app. It's a web-based app that was created and is maintained by an NGO called HuriDocs. HuriDocs is a short form for Human Rights Information and Documentation Systems. They're a peer ally of ours. And so they developed this tool called Uwazi. It's being used by all different types of groups like journalists, human rights organizations, academics who are documenting human rights violations. And so it's specifically made for a human rights purpose. And as I mentioned, it's open source, meaning it's free for anyone to download and use and adapt. The only difficulty I would say with that is that self-hosting, like if you download it and try to use it yourself, you do have to host it yourself, which requires some kind of like some expertise in terms of like server administration and that kind of thing. And so HuriDocs actually does offer a hosted version where they host it for you. And in most cases, unless you have a very large database, that will be free if you're under a certain threshold for like the size of your database. So that I think is a really good option for a lot of groups, so you don't have to host it yourself. The other benefit of HuriDocs hosting it is that they push all of these security patches, they push all the updates to their hosted instances, so then you don't have to even like worry about, running the security updates and everything. And as I mentioned, it's an app that it was built for human rights defenders to use to document violations. So they do have like security really top of mind, which I think is another pro for using Uwazi as a database option. In terms of community engagement collaboration, it's a web-based tool, as I mentioned, so it's possible for people in different locations to log in and use the tool. So I think it's actually really useful for like remote collaboration. In terms of usability, as I mentioned, like if you're having a hosted version and you're not running any of the back end, in terms of just the front end of entering data, cataloging, it's fairly user-friendly. It's like a kind of interface that most people are familiar with, like a form that you can fill out. It's available in multiple languages, which is really useful. And yeah, the only thing is that you do need internet access to be able to use it, since it is like hosted remotely and you access it over the web.
Yeah, I think this is very helpful, and I think again, like all the relevant links, we're gonna make sure that this is definitely available in the description of the video, including like the article that Yvonne mentioned that Yvonne and Ines written. And I think is very helpful also that Yvonne, when she's telling us about some tool or some cataloging, she's going through the factors that we just explained and how the factors can inform our decision in choosing, like, okay, is that a good one or a bad one? Or does this fit our needs or doesn't fit our needs? Do you have example on that specific database and how it was used in some by some groups, etc.?
Yeah, so we're using Uwazi right now on a project that we're collaborating with a group called Rohingya Vision. It's a project called the Rohingya Genocide Archive, where we are capturing and preserving and cataloging videos that document the mass atrocities and violations that are being perpetrated against the Rohingya minority in Myanmar. So we're using Uwazi for that. And just to explain like why we chose it, I mean, all of those factors that I've just explained, but we were looking for something that was web-based, that a decentralized team of archivists could use to do cataloging from different locations. We needed something that had like strong like security and privacy kind of built into it. And so that's why, again, this was a good choice for this project, because there were a lot of security issues, related to this project. We wanted something that was, that could be, because the collection isn't public, that could be, but eventually we want to make portions of the collection public that, could support like having something that's totally closed and requires a login, but has the ability to like publish stuff that can be publicly accessible down the line. With this project, we did have a budget for it. And so we were able to contract with HereDocs to provide technical support for the development of our database. I know not everybody is in that situation. So if you're in a situation where you don't have a budget and you have to set it up yourself, even a hosted version, you still have to, as we talked about, build your own data structure, get all your data into it. That's something you might want to consider. So if you have a budget that you could contract with HereDocs to support, and then if not, then you'd have to do it yourself.
Okay, can I just ask you something here? Like, other than the budget, was there, like, by the group that we were having, like, close support to them, were there any other obstacles or problems during the archiving itself and using that?
Yeah, I would say one maybe shortcoming of Uwazi is that it wasn't really built for video collections specifically. It was more just to manage information. And so I would say like the video features are not super built out. So it can support video preview from a few different platforms, but it wasn't designed just to catalog video collections. So we kind of had to make it work for that.
All right. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's really interesting. And thank you so much, Yvonne, for that. I think, do you have another tool that you want to tell us more about other than Uwazi?
Sure. Just to emphasize, there are numerous tools out there, and there is a very thorough list that was created by archivists that it's linked in our in the blog Yvonne mentioned. So just to illustrate that we are going in depth in just 3 tools, but there are way others out there. So I would like to share about Tainacam. Tainacam was developed by Brazilian universities since 2014. It is a super flexible and it's an open source platform for digital collections and repositories. It's actually a WordPress plugin that you can use, copy, modify, and share without restrictions. The source code is in GitHub for collaboration, meaning this is a free software. And although it was initially designed for museums, and there is a very big use in the museum scope, now it's been adopted by many human rights projects, and it has some special features that include the geolocation to allow you to view items on a map, and also the taxonomy, which is a very controlled and hierarchized list of terms. And this is very important for in case you're thinking about exporting your database from other to import it in Tainacam. Tainacam uses the Dublin Core metadata model, and you can also customize filters and the presentation. You can also connect different items across collections or in the same collection. And although Tanakan is free and has no installation or upgrade cost, it runs on WordPress. So you need the WordPress hosting. You can either pay for the web hosting service, or with some IT skills, you can install it, web server and WordPress on your own computer and run Tanakan offline. So, and I would also share the Tanakan user roles is similar to the WordPress. You can customize permissions, and you can also track changes with a log system. And you can also, this is very important for community projects, which is you can submit items to your collection, like external public can submit items. And this can be, you can configure in a way that you can approve before publishing. So this is a great way to build like a community archive with Tanakan. And you can also have, users can also comment on items anonymously or with a login. And as I mentioned, Tanakan allows you to export your data with CSV files or import data, which makes very easy to use. But I think the best feature for me, it's a very user-friendly. It's very easy to use. You don't need to be an expert like a programmer or anything. And just emphasizing that the data model, it's the most important thing. So you have to be clear on what you want to input in this tool.
So Ines, just about the same tools that you're describing, like what like do you think like is it available in all the languages, or is it available in a specific language or only English? Like what is the accessibility of it for everyone?
So Tanakan was initially developed in Portuguese, but now it has many languages. The whole documentation is available both in English and Spanish. But the plugin itself, the software itself, it's now available in Albanian, Catalan, French, Greek, Slovak, in different Spanish from Colombia, Mexico, and Spain, Swedish, and Ukrainian, but I must emphasize that those versions are in different levels of development.
Maybe do you have example of how it was used by some groups or activists you want to mention and highlight?
Yeah, Tanaka has been used by many partners in Latin America, especially in Brazil. But I'm gonna choose the Brazilian Association of Audiovisual Preservation repository on audiovisual preservation documentation. So they have about almost 200 items of theses, articles, texts, guidelines, manuals, podcasts, webinars in their repository. And the interesting thing about this, it's aimed to be a collective repository. So there is a form that people can submit their own items on audiovisual preservation, and this information is reviewed before publishing, but in a way that the repository keeps growing and growing.
Very inspiring. That's really inspiring. Thank you so much for this example. We do have another tool, Yvonne, that you wanna mention as well. I will leave it to you. Just tell us more about the third tool that we have today.
Yeah, so the third tool I want to talk about is called FileMaker. It's different from the two tools we just talked about, Uwazi and Tanakan, in that it's a completely commercial tool. It's not like an open source tool. It wasn't, developed by an NGO or academic. It's so FileMaker was developed by a company called Claris. It's like a subsidiary of Apple. But yeah, we have used it and find it useful because it basically it combines like a backend database engine with a very accessible graphical user interface, so that ordinary people who don't have a lot of training can use it and design databases just by dragging and dropping and pointing and clicking, filling in forms and dialog boxes. And so FileMaker is really widely used, primarily, I would say, in the United States by like small businesses or like small organizations. It's not created specifically for human rights use. It's more kind of a general use commercial app that people, just buy off the shelf.
And is it
So-
user-friendly because of that, you think?
Yeah, so I would say that the plus of using FileMaker is that it is quite user-friendly. Of course, you still have to design your own database. You have to have a strong data model in order to design it. But once you have that in place, you can design it just by dragging and dropping and creating fields. And then, you can create different layouts. It's very flexible. And relative, it's not like so easy to use that you can just like start using it. You do need to read the documentation and the user manuals. But one good thing is that because it has such a wide user base, it's used, in all types of contexts, that there is a lot of documentation online. It's very well documented. There's also a lot of user communities. So people on FileMaker chat boards or on Reddit, like posting their questions and people posting answers, because it is so widely used. So those I would say are the pluses of FileMaker. The other plus that was useful in the context in which we used it was that there are different options. There's like a FileMaker cloud option where it runs on the cloud. If you have good internet, you can have it hosted on the cloud. But there's also an option to have a completely offline version of FileMaker that just runs on your computer, and you don't need any sort of like expertise. Like you don't need to run a web server or anything. It just is like an app that you install on your computer, and then you have a database app on your computer. So that's like another plus of it. I would say the minus is perhaps the cost. And so, as opposed to the other two tools that we've just talked about, you do have to buy FileMaker like you would buy other commercial software, and it's not that cheap. So the offline FileMaker Pro that just runs on your computer comes from a one-time cost of almost $600 US, and the license for the cloud version, that's an annual license, is about $1,200 per year for 5 to 10 users. So there is sort of an upfront cost, but if you have, but if you have the budget for that, that's something you might want to consider. Even open source tools have some cost. Like if you have to hire people to help you set it up, or you have to pay for like the hosting or other things. But just to be very clear, like FileMaker does come with like a big upfront cost that might be out of reach for some people. But yeah, in terms of the other factors, if FileMaker Cloud is really great for collaboration. So similar to Tynakan and similar to Uwazi, it's like a web-based app, and so people can use it online. They can also have you run it on your computer, but the data is coming from the cloud. So it's very useful for that.
I have a question just before you continue. Like, you think, like, but just because it is, it is a commercial kind of app, you think that the privacy and the security, like they pay attention at the same level if the app is designed for human rights defenders? You think that this element is satisfied, or maybe it is compromised, you think, because the target groups is different?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on your risk. So, just having the offline option where it just runs on your computer might provide protection, depending on like whether your risk is that, you don't want your content living in the cloud somewhere. So in that sense, you could say that is a secure option. But then it depends on the context. Like if you have a risk that, your local computer isn't safe, or you're not in a safe place, then maybe having the offline option is actually more insecure than having a cloud, like having all your data up in the cloud. So it really depends on your own particular situation.
Okay, yeah, great. Do you have anything else to add on this application, or do you have a surprise case study for us, or like some groups that used it?
Yeah, I can definitely share a case study. So we used FileMaker in our project that we did in collaboration with Berkeley Copwatch, which is one of the oldest cop watching organizations in the United States. We helped Copwatch to develop their database to record incidents of police misconduct in the Berkeley, California community. They had been documenting using video and documenting on paper. So the reason why we chose FileMaker for that project was because they wanted an offline option. So, they have like an office space, they have a computer, they wanted something that was not on the cloud, that they could just run, within the safety of their office. And so FileMaker was a good choice for that reason. FileMaker also enabled Berkeley Copwatch to track different types of information because it's a relational database app. So they wanted to be able to track incidents, they wanted to be able to track videos, they wanted to be able to track police officers, all these different types of data that they wanted to be able to relate to each other. So they wanted to know which officers were at which incident and which videos had which officers and which videos documented which incidents, etc. And so a relational database app was really required for that. They also wanted something that had a lot of, was very user-friendly and customizable because they're a volunteer-based organization. They work with a lot of different volunteers coming from different experience levels, and they wanted something that they could easily train volunteers to enter data into properly. So yeah, for those reasons, FileMaker was the right choice for that project.
Yeah, that's again like I use for the for like an application to make sure that the human rights work is like making an impact, and this is like one of the main elements, one of the main points that when we're talking about archiving and this very conversation about the database of archiving, I think it's very important to make sure that there is on the way to justice and accountability, there is we're trying to pave the road for that. Definitely. I want to go to Ines, and I know that Ines has a very interesting tool that so many people love and so many people also hate at the same time. So what is the fourth tool that we have today for cataloging and database, Ines? Tell us more about it.
It's actually spreadsheets. It's actually more than one software. But database, it's about structuring data, and spreadsheet is the most simple way to do that, to organize, to sort, to filter, to locate, and to share your data. And it's way easier than a database software, but although it's very flexible, you need lots of efforts to ensure that it's consistent. And those softwares that I mentioned can be LibreOffice, Microsoft Excel, Mac Numbers, or online tools like Google Sheets, Airtable, or Microsoft Excel Web. But sorry, no matter the app, basic spreadsheet can really help you to systematize and control your information. And I must share that the costs vary because LibreOffice, Google Sheets, and Numbers are for free, but Microsoft Excel does come with some versions of Windows with different prices and plans, and the same way of the Airtable. And it's crucial that you check for data consistency with collaborators. And in some cases, like Google Sheets, you can track changes and you can review the version history to see them. And there are some practice that you should do or avoid in order to have a better control of your data. You shouldn't, for example, merge cells. You should be able to insert a control set of data to make it more consistent, and also you should configure your columns correctly by data type, like for instance, number, date, and text. And to avoid, you recently shared on the date format, like from the US and the Europe format and other regions in the world. You can, for instance, choose for stating the date as year, month, and date. That's the type of thing that you should check before setting up your database in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, stick to any format, but just stick with one format. This is the whole thing. Like, choose whatever format you want, but just, agree that this is the format everyone will use.
Yeah, but the thing with year, month, and date, there is no way to make mistakes. So that's my preferred one. And you can find a lot of documentation online about working with spreadsheets and any of these tools. And you can, the thing with spreadsheets, if it comes too big, or if you start to use some tricks to handle your data, for instance, like color coding, you have to scroll a lot to find data, or you have to reformat the file. In that case, you definitely should migrate to another software. If the spreadsheet, like if the information in the database becomes too big. And yeah, if you decide to use it on offline version of it, but you still are collaborating, beware of the versions of the file. I encountered in a few projects, like supposedly the most updated version not being clear, having duplicated information. Like, you have to be very conscious on how to deal with offline documents.
Yeah, that's very great tips for anyone who's using spreadsheets for anything, not for archiving only. But it is, I think, great tips. Thank you so much. Do we have a group of people, and I'm sure there are many who use spreadsheets for archiving and cataloging. But do you have some groups that you wanna tell us more about it when they are using spreadsheets for a database for archiving?
Yeah, sure. There is this long-time partner from the program, Latin American Caribbean program at Witness. The partner is Laboratório Popular de Médios Livres, like Popular Lab of Free Media, in a free translation. So they built up Memória Viva, which collects images, videos, photos, audios from public protest in Latin America. So they created this platform where people can submit their recordings that they do from this public protest. We all know that we have in recent times several demonstrations in numerous countries in Latin America. So they provide a way to submit this into a secure cloud service. And also for people to submit the information connected to this recording. And the information is submitted by Elmasry, which is a web platform for forms. So Memória Viva collects this information in Elmasry, which is a web app service for forms. And the information is then structured in spreadsheets. And because of that, because there is no deep control in how to submit the data, we have different settings. For instance, there is one question about the location, and if you don't emphasize, if you don't create, if you don't structure your questions, you could have one square as the input of the information, but also one city, one corner, one country, So this is a very simple example on the way that the information is not well consistent. And Memória Viva is so Memória Viva is planning to switch to Tainacan, and they are checking that, because Tainacan also allows information to be submitted by external users. But it's just one example. We at Witness, we have many databases in spreadsheets. We have several, and it's really important to create the data dictionary along with the rules to each of the metadata, each column in this case.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ines and Yvonne. I think you have really given us like 4 examples of like the most common cataloging and database tool, and I think this is really helpful to anyone who's watching this video, hoping to get like examples. Again, in the beginning of the video, we said like there is no single correct answers for what database and cataloging tools should I use, but there are these tools, there are these factors, and there are like those people who use everyone, and everyone might come with pros and cons, and you should be able to choose it based on your needs and your circumstances. We mentioned Uwazi, we mentioned Tincan or Tinacan, and FileMaker and Spreadsheet, and I hope I pronounced all of them right. If not, please forgive me. Again, we're gonna put also links underneath the video in case you're trying to look for any of these applications for further. And my next question is gonna be like your recommendations and your tips for anyone who's trying to choose a tool, either any tool, like not necessarily out of the 4 ones, but any tool for cataloging and database for archiving. Like, what are your tips? And I'm gonna start with Yvonne. What are the main tips and recommendations that you really advise with?
Yeah, so I think like as you just mentioned, and as we talked about, like the first step in like choosing a tool is really having a good understanding of what your own needs and requirements are. So like just like having a little planning session and like thinking at like what are the features that I actually need in a tool, and so then you can start your research from there. And yeah, then I would say you want to look around at what's available. Like Ines pointed out the resource that has like links to a lot of the different tools that are out there besides the ones that we just shared. And you might want to sort of play around with the ones that are freely available. You might want to experiment and play around with. So for instance, Uwazi, the first tool that I shared, they have a demo, like a sandbox version on their website that you can like play around with it. If you have access to spreadsheet software, you can kind of play around with the different versions of spreadsheet software that are out there. You know, you might, if you have access to like a WordPress, you might want to try playing around with Tainacan or any of the other tools that are out there.
Ines, do you also have tips and recommendations you want to share with us?
So my recommendation would be to get to know a little bit about the tool before you deciding for it. Like you can navigate online collections in either Uwazi or Tainacan, or get to know more on FileMaker online, and also of course the spreadsheet. And to be very clear and to spend a lot of time in creation your data model, just re-emphasizing what Yvonne just shared. To do a lot of tests before sharing your collection, and in case you are working with born digital files, and in case you're using working with analog documents, you have to understand each type of metadata connected with the specificity of the document. And you should be aware of the questions you want to be answered with this database. If you're only using this database to provide access to your collection, or you're using to do like the management of the preservation of it. So you have to be very clear on what do you need out of this database?
Do you have anything else to add, Yvonne, on the tips and recommendations?
Sure. So, just to build on what Ines was saying and what we mentioned earlier, yeah, like looking for the tools that align with like how you work and what you need. And one other thing I wanted to note is your data security needs. We talked about that a little bit earlier. That's really important to make sure that the tool aligns with your security needs. And as I mentioned, the tools have like pros and cons, or different, they just have different features that can accommodate different types of security needs. And you have to really assess what your needs are. And yeah, I think that the model that we kind of presented today in this talk, like the different factors, you can use those factors as a way of doing your assessment of all of the different tools. So I can't remember what they all are off the top of my head, but like cost, usability, security, all of those factors you can use in your own assessment.
Yes. Thank you so much, Yvonne and Ines. I think in this video, we really started with asking the main question of like, what is the best cataloging and database tool that we can use for archiving, especially in the human rights sphere of work. And the answer was like, there is no single correct answers, but Ines and Yvonne told us about some factors. If we just go through them and we understand them, and then we apply them into any tool in the available around us, and then these factors will help us to decide whether or not this tool is a best fit for our needs or no. And we really, after that, also we discussed like 4 main tools, and we also discussed like some groups and some organizations that are actually using these tools and how they are using them for their archiving efforts, and also whether or not they are facing obstacles while working in this archiving or in this cataloging. And we ended up with also Yvonne and Ines sharing with us some recommendations and tips for choosing. And again, we should always include the factors that we mentioned in the beginning. Again, I will just before I end the video, I just want to give also a chance to the 2 amazing colleagues. I'm very privileged to have Yvonne and Ines. If they want to add a final thought or a final comment on anything that they mentioned. And I will start with Yvonne.
I guess my final note would just to reiterate that it's, that it's having a strong underlying data model, so a good data structure and good rules for entering data is important no matter which tool you're using. So I'll use that as my closing comment.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. Ines?
I would share that when you are creating images, records within, doesn't matter if it's to defend your community or your land. I think sometimes there is like a pressure, like other threats, maybe to your own life, to your own community, and sometimes the organization of these collections and archives becomes like not urgent in a way, but I would emphasize that gathering your own memory, your own practice of your community, it's a very powerful way to pursue justice. So, and of course, you have to have the preservation, a preservation plan to your collection, but and the cataloging would be the key to this content, the key to finding that specific image or audio, and to navigate this whole archive.
Thank you so much. And Yvonne, thank you so much, Yvonne, for coming. Yvonne Ing, the Senior Program Manager for the Archives Program at Witness, and Ines Aisengart, the Archives Program Coordinator at Witness. And as I promised, there will be also all the relevant links that we discussed throughout the video that they will be available for you, including the article that Ines and Yvonne written on the all cataloging, and there is much more information you can find over there, and also there will be other helpful links. I hope that you will find it helpful. And that was Mahmoud Elmasry's program, the MENA program coordinator. And thank you so much for watching, if you watched all the way through, and I really hope that this video have given you any information that will be helpful in any work that you do regarding in human rights, and also in the archiving for human rights. Thank you so much.